Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I want to talk about the Intel Arc A750 graphics card. Now I've had this card since about March of this year, so I've had it for about 3 months, and I've been using it throughout that time. Now you can see it's not installed in my system right now. I have reinstalled my 5700 XT because, jumping to conclusions here, I think I'm going to be selling this graphics card. So let me get into it. This video is going to be more about my experience, my lived experience with this graphics card, and not so much about hard benchmarking numbers. You can find those numbers anywhere else on YouTube and on the internet. And in fact, I believe Iceberg Tech just did a video today of recording this, going over a lot of the performance numbers for the next tier up, the A770. This is the A750, 8 gigabytes of VRAM, and honestly, a very, very good quality graphics card with a couple of hiccups and performance issues that make me just not able to recommend this product. All right, so let's go through it. So for starters, this is the ASRock version. As you can tell, you can see it has a big, beefy cooler. The PCB is actually really small, but the cooler is much larger and extends over the edges, which makes its cooling performance much better than it would be otherwise. And this thing has a 0 RPM mode, and even when the fans ramp up, it is very, very quiet. The only thing that is annoying about the noise of this card is the coil whine. This thing has bad coil whine, and I've seen this with a lot of Intel graphics cards, so I don't think it's just this one. I think a lot of them do. Now, if you put headphones on, if you put them, have a pretty thick side panel for your case, you're not going to really hear it too much, but it was noticeable for me. So if you're sensitive to sound like I am, that's going to be something to be aware of. But it's not a deal breaker. This thing is pretty amazing. Like, they even have heat pads on the other side, which would sink into the backplate on this graphics card. Like, it's a really high quality graphics card, and they go on sale pretty regularly. Now, I know 250 is the MSRP. Well, I got this in March for 230. I know recently the Intel version was down to $200, which is like a very compelling price, but it does still have some hiccups. Now, it's not the way it was last year. The drivers have come a long way, the performance have come a long way, but it really depends on what games you want to play with it, and does it perform well in those games. For me, I had some issues in Overwatch, but they seem to be ironed out. I had some issues in older games, as to be expected, and okay performance in newer games. Basically, the way it seemed to perform in games for me was, when it was doing well, it was a little bit faster than my 5700 XT. When it wasn't doing well, it was a lot slower than it, or things would just crash. And that brings me into the next part of the video, which is, it's kind of those inconsistencies with this graphics card. I was having driver issues where the driver would crash. The refresh rate of my monitor would randomly change. The resolution of my monitor would randomly change. And that never happened with any other graphics card. I've had AMD and Nvidia graphics cards, and this is my first Intel one, and I'm only having issues with this one. I've swapped in other graphics cards, they work fine. This one's having the problem. Now, I did notice that if I use HDMI instead of DisplayPort, I have a much more consistent experience. Things kind of work much, much better. I don't know why DisplayPort is so inconsistent, but I've seen other reviewers, especially OzTalk's Hardware, talk about how DisplayPort just didn't really work consistently for him, and he had to go to HDMI. I had that same problem. Now, this card, I don't know if they're all like this, but the ASRock one has two HDMI ports, so you could do dual monitors with this, and two display ports. But again, the display ports, at least for me and others, have been inconsistent, so I don't know if I can recommend you using this if you need to use DisplayPort. My monitor can only do 165 hertz on DisplayPort, so it's kind of a bummer for me. Anything that was GPU accelerated, video editing software, even Discord and some games would just crash or crash the driver. And of course, I was reporting all of that to Intel, so hopefully we see some fixes in the future. But essentially, this is a card that is very much a first generation product. Okay, just keep that in mind. Think about the iPhone. If you can even think back that far, the iPhone came out and it was revolutionary, but it was not very good. It really struggled. And it wasn't until about the iPhone 3, the iPhone 3G, where it really kind of shined. It kind of got its act together. And I think we might see the same thing with Intel. This is a really good first try for graphics cards, and I really want to like this card. That's why it took me so long to make this video, and I've been debating on selling it or not selling it or keeping it. Ultimately, I'm going to sell it, but I think it's a great first try. It does do pretty well for what it is. It's just there's too much competition right now when you can get an AMD card for the same price or cheaper that just does better than this and has more stability and more longevity and more maturity. And keep your eyes open for the next generation. I think, again, it's a great first step, and if you like messing around with stuff, this is a fun card to mess around with. But ultimately, I don't think it's worth the money. I don't think it's worth buying if it's going to be your first or only graphics card. It's something to mess around with, but ultimately, in my opinion, not worth to keep it in your only build. Okay. Moving forward next year when Battle Mage comes out, I think that's going to be something really to look forward to. And the generation after that, the third generation, I think is when they're really going to get it together and have something very amazing and compelling. But for right now, this card just isn't really worth it, in my opinion, with the competition that's out there. The little driver bugs, software bugs, and even hardware bugs just doesn't make it worth it. Anyways, let me know what your experiences are with the Intel graphics cards down below. Would you still buy one after my review? And what do you think in general about Intel getting in the graphics card space? All right, I'll catch you guys in the next one.